Of American Baptist College. And Dr. LaFayette, let me welcome you to the show this morning.
Thank you very much, Dr. Haney.
Dr. LaFayette, I think that we've had you on a number of occasions to talk about Dr. Martin Luther King, to talk about the Godfathers program, to talk about the Freedom Rides, and just a whole variety of issues that you've been involved with. Indeed, to talk about American Baptist College as the new president of American Baptist College. But what we'd like to do today is to recognize that January the 20th represents the celebration of the annual Martin Luther King holiday, and that we are indeed fortunate to have in our midst a person who was a very, very close associate of Dr. Martin Luther King and who can give us some sort of personal remembrances of Dr. King that we can't find anywhere else. And so let's try to do that this morning. But first of all, let's talk about you as Bernard Lafayette. Give us some background information about your background and education and some of the things that led you to the presidency of American Baptist College.
Thank you very much. Well, it was a long journey. I must say it started off in Tampa, Florida. I'm a native of Tampa, and when I decided to go to college, I was already interested in being a religious leader. I had no idea I was going to be into the formal clergy. But I had this inclination that I wanted to be of some service in the church. And as a result of my inclination, I chose American Baptist College as a student back in 1958. I was in Nashville where I actually started my involvement in the movement on a formal level of working with the students here at Tennessee State and at Fisk University and Meharry, and actually Peabody and Scarrett had students, and also from Vanderbilt, involved in the sit-in movement. And I met Martin Luther King here in Nashville at Fisk University gym, where he came and gave support to our movement. I then decided that what I wanted to do was to devote full time, after our success here in Nashville, to furthering the cause and bring about social change. I felt we had to hit while the iron was hot. Mm-hmm. So like many went off and volunteered with the Peace Corps or VISTA programs and that sort of thing. There are some few of us like Diane Nash and John Lewis and Paul Brooks, Lester McKinney, who was a student at TSU. We decided that we were going to spend some time, maybe take off for a couple of years, and work full-time on a voluntary basis with SNCC, the Student Nonviolent Coordinating Committee. So that was my beginning efforts to work with the movement on a full-time basis. Well, I was later picked up by Martin Luther King for his staff, executive staff. And back in mid-60s, I worked with him in the Birmingham movement, the Selma movement, and the Chicago movement. And then I was plucked to be the national program administrator by Martin Luther King. Mm-hmm. So at first I was a little reluctant about going to work for Martin Luther King on a full-time basis, because I always enjoy doing other things. I believe in variety. But he said, no, I want you to come down to Atlanta. I want you to come and work full-time. Mm-hmm. I said, well, you know, I'm always going to support you. He said, no, I want you to come and join the staff.
It sounds as if Dr. King was a man who was insistent.
Oh, yes.
Talk about that aspect.
Well, it's a little personal story, and it turns out okay. But Dr. King had told me to come to Atlanta. I said, well, it would be helpful if I had a letter, some kind of description of what you wanted me to do, a title, and also maybe what the salary was, you know, things like that. You know, like, so I could make sure I could pay.
Livelihood kind of thing.
So I could know how much groceries I got to buy or whatever. But he said, okay, if you need a letter, I'll send one to you. Well, some time passed. I think it was like in September. The letter was going to come, and it never came. Mm-hmm. So there was a crisis in Boston, Massachusetts, with the NSP, Neighborhood Service Projects. I think it was under President Johnson. It picked about 10 cities or 14 cities where they were going to put in a lot of money to try to see if they can make an impact in the urban community by social services and coordinating those things together, etc. Well, they had some conflict among some people in the community in Boston, so they had sent for me to come and take over the project so they wouldn't lose the grant. So I said, well, if people have that much confidence in me, that means they'll cooperate. That's the key to getting things done. So I took the job and I went up and worked for the Ecumenical Center, and sure enough, we got things organized and we got the money. Okay? It was millions of dollars at stake. That's why people were very concerned. But we got the grant and that kind of business. Well, when Martin Luther King found out that I was going to be leaving Chicago, where I was living at the time, and go to Boston, he got on the phone and called. And this was a Sunday evening. He said, I thought you were coming to Atlanta. I said, well, you know, I was ready to come, but I didn't hear from you. I thought maybe, you know, you needed more time to make up your mind, or we're trying to work things out. He said, no, did you get a letter from Andy? Andy Young, Andrew Young. I said, no, not yet. He said, Andy didn't send you a letter? I said, no, you know, he's probably kind of busy, you know, whatever. I don't know. But I've already made up my mind that I have to go to Boston now because I made that commitment. But as soon as I finished that commitment, he said, well, I want you to make a commitment now, that when you complete that work at Boston, you'll come down here because this is urgent. And he said, this may be the last campaign. And I took him very seriously, and no sooner than I finished that project, I made a commitment for 3 months when I was in Boston. And I was glad I did go to Boston because that's where I met my you know, wife at that time. So I then returned to Atlanta to work full-time on the Poor People's Campaign. And I was glad I did because I would have had some feelings about it because it was short-lived in 1968, as you know. So I worked from him full-time on the Poor People's Campaign with Martin Luther King from January to April. It was a short period of time on a full-time basis. But I'd been working as a consultant in Rochester, New York, when the gangs had a riot there, in Chicago, you know, worked together. I mainly served as a strategist, sort of a forerunner. Like in Selma, Alabama, I was the first staff person to go in there to lay the groundwork. That was kind of the job that I had in the movement. Get a lay of the land, get people together and organizing them so they could work together, people who were at odds with each other, try to settle their differences and that kind of business, etc. In fact, I remember with Malcolm X, first time I met him was in Selma, Alabama. Malcolm X had come down to give a speech at Tuskegee Institute, this university now. And since he was in the area, he decided to come to Selma, Alabama. And there was a lot of fury, and people got all upset, excited. They said, we don't want him coming down here, you know, he's going to start a riot, or, you know. I said, no. Now, at this time, Martin Luther King was in jail. Malcolm X met with the group and to say that, you know, he's a sensible guy. You know, he's not going to come down here and try to destroy anything. He said, I came to support. And I sided with Malcolm X. I said, listen, this man is history, you know, he's great, you know, and he's, we don't necessarily agree with a lot of his methodologies, that kind of thing, but we agree that we want to be free. So we might not agree on the method, but we agree on the goal, and he would be respectful of our approach to this problem. And sure enough, he made a very brilliant speech in Selma, Alabama. But one of the things that struck me, which I will never forget, he said that you better listen to Martin Luther King. Otherwise, you're going to have to listen to me.
Okay, and we're going to talk about that when we come back after we take our first commercial break. And we'll be back with you following this commercial break. Yet, the president